So that's just so that any families or practitioners that may not have been able to make it will be able to have access to this as a resource. And we will also send the recording link along with any resources mentioned tonight will be emailed to all registrants next week. For those who may be new to Early Intervention Week or just learning about it, it's something we celebrate every year, usually during the third week of May. We're especially excited this year because Governor Murphy's office officially recognized Early Intervention Week with a proclamation. So this week is about celebrating the incredible caregivers as well as the dedicated professionals who support them. It goes along with our theme this year that is Stronger Together, and it highlights the power of working together to help families and every child thrive and be the best they can be. We truly hope that the information you hear today and really throughout the whole week is meaningful and beneficial to you. So I'm really excited to introduce our speaker today, Michele Parkins. She's an occupational therapist and infant and early childhood mental health specialist with a lot of experience supporting families with sensory and social emotional challenges. She's the founder of the sensory emotional engagement model and the Great Kids Place in Rockaway, New Jersey, and also a parent of two sensory children herself. So she has both her clinical knowledge as well as her lived experience to her work, and we are so glad to have her. So, Michele, I'll go ahead and let you take it from here.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm just going to share my presentation here. Okay. Um, oh, there we go. Okay. Um, all right, good. Everybody can see it.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, let me just scoot my stuff around here. All right, so we are here together to talk about the power of play through a sensory emotional lens. I always try to give so much information in a short amount of time, so I try to go back and like not make it so crazy, but we'll see how it goes. But I really want to spend some time talking about how to use play to support sensory motor development as well as social emotional development and how we can do that. And probably most of you are already doing that. Um, as you're playing in your sessions. So I'll just jump right in. Um, just some additional information. A lot of my work is from the work of Dr. Lucy Jane Miller, who is a now retired amazing occupational therapist out of Colorado. She was the writer of the book Sensational Kids, if anybody has ever read that. But she believed so strongly in everybody having a sensory profile and that we're all sensory beings, and that by understanding the way that we process sensation, we can really understand the way that we just are with others and in the world. So some of her work was related to getting SPD in the DSM. And then when that was trickier than we all hoped, she spent a lot of time just talking more about all children and humans having sensory profiles and how we understand that to support engagement and relationships. I also had the amazing pleasure of working with Dr. Serena Weider from the DIR model. And so a lot of my social emotional background comes from that work with her and having the opportunity to bounce my ideas off of her in developing this model has been amazing as well. Through the work of sensory emotional or sensory motor work, it was very clear that social emotional work and social emotional knowledge was needed more and more and more. And as OTs, we don't get a ton of that. So I did my advanced certification at MSU with Caitlin Mulcahy, and Jerry Costa was still there at the time, and then went on to become endorsed as an infant mental health specialist, which was all just an incredibly rich and rewarding experience to do that. So I just like to provide that as my lens, but I want to start with talking about why do we talk about play? And as OTs, we talk about it because play is the occupation of children, right? So as an occupational therapist, we really are um, focusing on enhancing occupational performance in whatever population we're working with. And play is a huge occupation of children, as well as a huge developmental supporter of children. So that's first and foremost. And I do see like chat kind of coming up. I'm really not awesome at jumping back and forth between chat and presentation mode, but I will have time for questions. So you can feel free to, if it's like a burning question, to put it in the chat and I will go back and kind of look through them and answer them. But I try to just sort of go with the flow of the presentation and then go back to, the questions and chat towards the end. So there's tons of research on play and why we should play. And a lot of that work talks about how play brings a safety to people, right? To all people, children and adults. And then we're in the play zone, then we feel safe, we feel connected, we can explore things that we may otherwise not explore because of that regulation state that play puts us in. So it puts us in a regulated state of safety and welcomes connection with others. At the same time, when you're playing, you can experience different emotions, and it's okay to feel those because you're playing, right? So you can be like this little guy in the picture here, a knight with a sword and fighting bad guys and not be like acting badly, right? Because you're playing that you're fighting bad guys. So the aggressive play that happens in play is healthy and exploratory in that way because you're a character, right? So you can experience these bigger emotions that typically are maybe trickier to experience in daily life through play in a way that is safe and comfortable for those around you that are also playing. And it allows that regulation and that chance to try it and see what it feels like, and then try this emotion and see what that feels like. So in this way, it provides a really nice space of regulating our behavior, regulating our emotional responses, and really exploring and discovering new ways of being and new things of doing. Because we feel safe and connected in play, we can sort of stretch out of our comfort zone and try something that we might not feel like we can do, right? So when you're playing, though, you're not feeling those like, I can't do this, right? Because you're in play with another person, and it allows you that discovery space that may not have otherwise occurred. Dr. Gil Foley calls this a psychosensory experience, where in play you're experiencing this social emotional regulation, social emotional exploration, and also exploration with your body. Right. So from a sensory motor standpoint, you might be moving in new ways, you might be touching new things, you might be squeezing and pushing and pulling and climbing and doing all of these things that are novel because you're playing. Right. And at the same time, you're experiencing these different emotions because you're playing. So he refers to it as a psychosensory experience, which I always like. So ultimately, play allows both things to happen. It allows us to act with our body and feel in our emotions. And we're doing it with other people a lot of times. So it brings that social connection between our acting and our feeling. So ways of being in our body and ways of feeling in our emotions, and doing that with another person. So in this way, it provides a really nice middle ground for a multidisciplinary approach to treatment, right? So you're moving and you're talking and you're engaging and you're feeling emotions. And so you're sort of hitting all these different areas that we typically practice in silos, right? So we've got our OTs, our DIs, our speech therapists, our mental health practitioner, right? We have all these little pieces of the puzzle. But if we all are playing, then we are in some way infusing the work of each other together, right, into every interaction that we're having. Along with play, and again, I said I want to frame this play through what's called sensory emotional lens. I'll go a little bit into the sensory emotional engagement model. I will definitely provide a lot of resources at the end to dive deeper into this, because I can talk to you for hours about this. But this is a frame of reference or a model that I created with my team here at Great Kids Place just through the years of doing this work and trying to clarify for the families that we're working with this connection between the sensory motor experiences that the children are having, the emotional experience that the kids are having, their behavior and the way that they're acting, and ultimately the way they're showing up, right? Their temperament or their personality. And that when we're having these conversations over and over, trying to make these connections, is there a clearer way to talk about this? And so just through research and through writing and through talking and supervision and all these things, it culminated into naming it, right? The sensory emotional engagement model, so that we can share it and hopefully help other people be able to communicate the same thing. So ultimately what this model describes is the connection between the way that we take in information from our body, right? So our sensory systems, the way we move our body, so our actions and our behavior, and the emotions that that bring about. And then so basically, the way we say it is the way that we take in sensations and move our body impacts the way we feel. The way we feel impacts the way we take in sensations and move our body. The way we act, sense, and feel impacts the way that we act and interact with other people or our personality style, right? So there's like a research in the temperament space on sensory experiences and how they relate to certain temperament styles. There's a little bit in the larger picture personality space, but this is really a call to say to better understand personality, which allows us to know how to act and interact with the child, right? So that goodness of fit concept of, if I know the way of being and I know why and how to relate to their way of being, then we have this really nice goodness of fit. And we're able to engage in a really beautiful way to support intervention, to support development, to support relational development between our families together, right? Our caregivers and our kids. So really it's a call to understand that body-based piece. So what does the sensory motor system have to offer to the way we feel and to the way that we act and interact with others? And so just to kind of feel this, right? So there's tons of research in this area, and we're writing a couple articles right now, connecting these, like kind of pulling together the existing research with our research to have this, more well understood. But just we know in our bodies, we can feel this. So find a picture, like pick whichever one you want, and just take a minute to hold the picture in mind. So you can close your eyes, you can keep your eyes open, however you'd like to do that, but put yourself into one of these pictures. And I want you to think about the sensations that are occurring. So what are you hearing? What are you seeing? What are your muscles doing? Right? Is there resistance? Are they relaxed? Are they tense? Are you exerting a lot of force? Are you not exerting a lot of force? Is your body touching something else? What's your body awareness like? What movement are you doing? Is it predictable? Are you in control of it? Is it organized? Is it disorganized? Okay. What feelings are you feeling? What emotional experiences are you having? Okay. And who are you with? And how are all of these things connected? And a lot of times it's hard to separate those. So I think when I first said, put yourself in this picture and what are you feeling? What are you hearing? Right. You're probably mixed it up. Right. So for me, I don't know why I picked the city. I hate the city, but I pick it because it's strong for me. Right. So I immediately go and I'm like, it's noisy, it's loud, I'm annoyed, I'm frustrated, I'm nervous, I'm anxious. Right. I can't control my body because people are bumping into me. I'm feeling lost because I never know where I'm going. My spatial awareness is terrible, so I have no idea where I'm going, no matter how many times I go in there. And I'm usually mad at my husband because he made me go. Right. So like all of those things happen at one time, and they're not isolated, right? It's because they're all happening at one time that you experience that. So we know through just our daily experiences that these things all happen together, that we have sensory experiences, we move our body, we feel the emotions, and we're in a relationship with somebody else that gets sort of tainted by all of those experiences, whether it's good or bad, based on all of those things coming together. I'll do one more example, and this is the experience of emotions through actions. So the first one I want you to do is just go. And then you can put it in chat if you want. You can think to yourself of how it made you, like, what did you feel immediately after that action? So a lot of people will say, scared, anxious, surprised, excited, right? So this same action had all these very different from like more tricky or negative feelings to more positive, excited feelings. But you didn't feel that before you did the action, right? The action actually made you feel that. Um, the other one you can do is like if you have something in front of you that's like to drink or eat, go to lift it and not be able to, right? Don't pretend like don't have enough like strength to do it. And think about that emotional experience. So some people say weak or defeated, frustrated, annoyed, angry, hungry, thirsty, right? Whatever it might be that you're trying to grab. But again, you didn't feel that until you did that, right? So the most fun research in this area is on actors who end up falling in love after they would do a movie together, right? So they act the part over and over and over and again. They act that emotion and then they end up feeling that emotion right after they did it. So just like some fun ways to feel this connection, right? Between the sensations, the movements, the emotions, and then our way of being, our personality. So within this frame of reference, within this model, play is crucial. Play is crucial because it provides that safe and regulated state to explore differently within this space. Okay. So the play role that we invite a child to do through a sensory emotional lens, it invites them to express or feel a specific emotion. And then that emotional expression invites engagement in otherwise inexperienced sensory motor opportunities. So I'll just give an example of this that happened today in the gym. So we have I usually have pictures of our gyms, and I didn't put it in this. I don't know why. I think because I was nervous about the time. But one of our gyms is a pirate room, right? So there's like a pirate ship that's also a ball pit, and there's all these different swings because it's a sensory gym. And this little guy walks in and he's like kind of nervous and like, doesn't really know, doesn't really want to get on the equipment, like kind of a little bit scared that there's like pirate stuff around. And then we just handed him like a foam sword and started telling him that like there's treasure and the treasure you have to capture the treasure before the other pirates get the treasure. And he was like, oh, right, got all into the role of this character. And then he was on all the swings, riding to the different other islands to find the treasure on this island and then find the treasure on the other island. And as walking in, he would not have just gone and done that, right? He wouldn't have gone to just play on any of the equipment. He was too scared didn't feel strong enough in his body. So when we invited him to feel strong and brave, and that he's the one that can help us get this treasure, and he's the strongest one to get across to all the islands, he engaged on all this different equipment that we had available to him that he would have otherwise avoided and does avoid on the playground, right? Doesn't engage in this kind of play on the playground. So I'm going to take a deeper dive into this idea of play. Play is an acronym as well for this work within this framework, but it stands for playful interactions layered with sensory experiences, affect pairing. So that's like our facial expressions, our gestures, our tone of voice, the way that we say things, the language that we use, with a lot of focus on your relationship. In our work, in our practice, the relationship is the therapist and the child, but also the caregiver and the child. So the caregivers are always in the sessions with us, and there's specific roles that we're giving the caregivers in this play to support all of these things, right? So I wish I would have time to go through all of this with you. I don't, but what I want to focus on that I think can be something you can take away is the P and the L, right? So the playful experiences layered with sensory experiences. So that's like the structuring the play, we call it. The supporting the connection is the affective ways of being for yourself, like what roles that you play and the role that you're having the caregiver play. And I decided to kind of go one way, the sensory piece, because I feel like everybody wants more and more and more about sensory usually. So we'll do talk more about the sensory input side of things, and then the emotional themes and the emotional play that you can layer in with that sensory play. So the overview of this play idea is first we're thinking about the different sensory experiences. So when we're engaging in play with the child, with their caregiver, we're thinking about all of these different areas. So again, just like everything else with a short time, we can't talk about all the sensory systems, but I bring up the ones here that I feel like are sort of more readily available when we're thinking about play in our work with kids. So the vestibular system is movement, right? So I'm going to kind of be quick on the description of them as well. But if you hear vestibular, you're thinking about movement, the movement experiences, the spatial understanding of the child in the environment, right? So the vestibular system is in our inner ear. It's like a GPS for us. It guides all of our movements through space. Um, and it guides our pacing, our timing, our rhythm, how much we move, how often we move, what direction we move in. All of that is within that system. So you can think about to activate this system, it is movement. It's in it because it's in our inner ear, it's really movement of the head, right? Which is why as adults, we get dizzy easier, we get disoriented easier. So we don't really move our head in a lot of different ways, right? We're usually exactly in the position we're in right now, sitting upright, maybe nodding, maybe shaking, right? But we're no longer rolling, we're no longer spinning, we're no longer swinging, right? Unfortunately, unless you work here, you are. but um, but that's we don't do that, right? We don't activate the system. But those are the ways. So even at home, right? So a lot of people say, how do I do sensory work when I don't have a sensory gym? This is how you think about movement of the head in various positions: log rolling, tumble rolling, spinning, jumping, running, crawling, tiptoeing, right? All the different heights that you could put the head, all the different directions you could put the head in, right? All of that activates the system that's right in here, right within our inner ear. So big body movement through space, but also if you don't have a lot of space, right? We did tons of this work during COVID, virtually, where we just talked about movement of the head, right? So even if you have a little tiny room that you're working in, if you look down to grab something and you look up to put it somewhere else, and then you reach to the side to put it somewhere else, and you just think about moving that head in different positions, you're activating that system. The proprioceptive system is our body awareness system. It comes from our muscles. So anytime you activate the muscles, pushing, pulling, climbing, carrying, lifting, anything that gives flexion and extension, right? Any input to the muscles and movement of the muscles activates that system. The tactile system is our touch system, and that's mostly textures, right? Different textures: soft, slimy, gooey, rough, smooth. And then the auditory system is just a variety of sounds. So we think about adding different sounds to the play that we're doing that are related to the play so that we can make it a multisensory experience. And then the emotional experience that often come with that sensory experience. So again, even if you're just thinking about this, what we know from our research is that all of these emotional experiences can happen because of what we just talked about, right? The connection between the sensory systems and the movement system. And when we experience different sensations and move our body in different ways, we can feel all of these things. We can feel connected, we can feel interested, we can feel exploratory, we can feel secure and powerful, we can feel curious, we can feel protected, we can feel brave and strong and helpful, confident, persistent, organized, right? All of these things can be experienced through the right amount of experience in the sensory systems. So I thought it would be helpful to give examples that happen in the developmental progression of play, just common play from early play to symbolic play and how this shows up. Right, so it's likely play you've done before, and now you can just kind of layer this sensory emotional lens on that play in the hope that it will then help you go, oh, okay, so that's what I was doing in that play. And I think I need a little bit more of this in this kind of play. How do I bring it over, right? How do I carry it over? So in OT, we talk about it kind of like, well, we relate this play to movement of the body, right? So body space play is like you're not really moving through space. It's mostly about your body and like just this kind of particular area. So things like, I'm going to get your toes, I'm going to get your nose, right? That kind of thing where it's like anticipation play, that very early anticipation play of I'm going to get you, right? Imitation play, like sticking out your tongue, having them stick out their tongue, right? Doing like this, and they're doing this, right? All of those sorts of early imitation-based play, pointing, right? All of that kind of stuff where you're looking for them to imitate your gestures and your facial expressions. All of that is like body space, right? It's how to move and organize our body to do things. Peekaboo, surprise, like a surprise hide and seek peekaboo games. So that very early play, what you're doing, in addition to having tons of fun, right, and connecting with that child, is you're building their body awareness, right? So I'm going to get your toes. Okay, where are my toes? My toes are down here. That means they're probably going to get this. I need to move my foot closer to that person, right? All of that stuff happens, and that requires the muscles to have the information, right? The proprioceptive system and the tactile system to go, where are my toes? My toes are here. Here's my toes, right? And they give you your toes. I'm going to get your fingers. And then the baby reaches fingers out, right? And hands out. And then that's all appropriate. It's like you're teaching their body, this is what my hand is, right? And this is how I move my hand closer to that caregiver to be able to play with me. As you're touching the, right, as you're doing the anticipation play with them and you're giving them that touch input of getting their toes, right? Then they're thinking about like, where exactly on my foot are you touching me? Are you touching my toes? Are you touching my heel? Are you squeezing hard? Are you squeezing light? Right? All of that builds this body awareness, this proprioceptive awareness, this tactile awareness. And it also works on this idea of modulation and regulation, right? Modulation is how much is happening. And is it too much? Is it too much? And is it not enough? Do I want more of this or do I want less of this? Right. And so we see that when we play with babies, right? We see them turn away from this kind of play when it's been enough. Right. So all of a sudden they're not interested anymore and you're getting their toes. They're not going to look for you when you're doing peekaboo. And that's wonderful, right? Because they've decided that was good. And then they might look away and then they look back. Right. And it's modulation of sensory input. How much input did I get? Is it enough? Is it not enough? Do I need more? Do I need to shut it down? Right. So this early play that you're doing is working on this sensory modulation space for our kids. Within that, they're also regulating their emotions, right? So they feel this huge connection with you and this huge interest, and they're curious about, are you going to do it again? And they feel like they know you're going to do it again. So that gives them a sense of security because they know it's going to happen again, right? And keep in mind, this is all assuming that these systems are functioning accurately and comfortably, right? So the same game could be very overwhelming for a baby that's not processing these sensory systems in a comfortable way, right? So if touch input is not comfortable, then these anticipation kind of games are not going to be fun, right? And engaging. They're going to be scary. They're going to bring about anxiety because that experience isn't playful. But for the sake of the conversation, I'm just going to speak more to like developing of these systems in a comfortable way that feels safe for everybody. The next kind of play that we see is what we refer to as reach space play, right? So passing and taking, right? Giving and receiving of objects, dropping the whole, favorite drop the thing off the high chair, right? Dropping and throwing. How do things fit together, right? Putting together different objects, seeing how they fit, pouring, filling and emptying, right? Pouring and emptying out. What happens if I do this? That cause and effect kind of play, stacking and knocking down kind of play, lining up objects, right? To kind of see how they look together. Are they the same? Are they different? Right? All of that kind of play. And what that play builds upon is how much force do I need to use, right? So we call that proprioceptive discrimination. How much do my muscles need to work? How much contraction do I have in my muscles? What is the position of my body that my body needs to get into in order to take or pass something, in order to build something and knock it down, right? How do I need to arrange my body in relation to that object, right? That's the developing that. As we're touching, so the touch system is our precursor to fine motor skills. So as we're touching different objects in this object play, we're experiencing the different shape, the different size, the different form, the different texture of that. And through that, we eventually develop a fine motor capacity through that. But that also tells us when we're getting dressed, right? How does this feel on my body, right? All of this early object play is working on these precursor areas. The other one that starts in this reach space play is what we call postural stability, is just the child's ability to keep their body upright, right, in a stable, upright position. So they start to reach out of their base of support, right, and reach to get the next object or reach to touch their caregiver. And they start to feel that wobble in their body as they're sitting, as they're standing. And then they start to hopefully accommodate for that, right? And kind of bring themselves back to center and then come out and then bring themselves back to center. So that ability to have that stability in their body and not just fall over is developed in this early play as well. And then they're developing what we call motor planning, which is the ability to sequence multiple steps, right? Put all this information together and do this, then this, then this, then this. At the same time, as they're stacking things, as they're putting them inside of it, as they're filling it and emptying it, as they're dropping it for you the 50th time, right? What are they building? They're building a feeling of confidence and persistence, right? I know I can do this. And it was that one didn't work. I'm going to try it again, right? I'm going to try to put this inside of this. That one didn't fit. I'm going to put this inside of this. That didn't fit. I'm going to try again, right? That early persistence and confidence to continue going. When they get it right, it feels very powerful, right? I did that. I dropped the thing on the floor and you picked it up. I dropped it on the floor again and you picked it up again, right? That's a very, very powerful feeling. And you feel really strong in your body and your ability to do things when you make somebody else do something, right, for you. And it feels really organized. So if I line everything up and it looks like it's all the same, that's very awesome. And that's an organization regulation capacity. When things fit inside each other, where they're supposed to fit inside each other, that feels very organized and regulating. So it simultaneously building this sensory motor and social emotional capacity as they're doing this work through what? Through their sensory experiences, through their movement, and through the relationship that they have with the other person that they're doing this with. And then we have movement through space and time. So that's when we start to push and pull, or walk and climb. Which chase and hide and seek become like a favorite now, right? Come and get me, chase me, right? Is a big one as soon as they start moving through space. What, the whole any kind of push toys, right? Pushing the shopping cart around, the little toy shopping cart, pushing the pretend lawnmower or the pretend vacuum, right? Those kinds of toys that allow for this movement through space are purposeful, right? So that kids can play in movement through time and space. We need them to experience that. What that does is what opens up a whole new world to the vestibular system, right? So that spatial movement system is like, wow, I can move up, I can move down, I can move in circles, I can push something that's really hard and I push something that's really small, right? There's like all these big, big, big experiences that are happening. So a lot of spatial information starts to be developed through movement, through the vestibular system. A lot of different bigger picture force use, right? How hard do I have to do this how hard do I have to push the ottoman across the floor versus my shopping cart across the floor, right? How do once we start moving our whole body, there's a whole other way of modulating that amount of force that we're using. There's a ton more stability in our body that's needed. Again, like you see that funny, like they start to push the one thing that's lighter than the other thing and they fall over, right? Because whoops, like that was too hard. I didn't mean to use that much and I didn't have enough stability in my body. Let me try it again. Okay, now I'm going to stabilize my body a little bit more and then I'm going to push the little shopping cart that I have. Okay, that worked. Right. So all of that movement through space. And then we have this really amazing capacity of motor planning of I'm going to go over here and then I'm going to go over here. And then now I can move all around and make a lot of big motor plans with my body. So enhancing that confidence, enhancing that powerful, strong and brave, the persistence. Now we can see helpful kind of play start to happen, right? Like they want to be pushing something else around in their shopping cart with you. They want to help you start to push the vacuum across the floor and sweep the floor and all these things. They want to start doing those things with you. So they start to build that helper role. And through that play, that early push, pull, carry, climb, move things around, like my caregivers can move things around, it gives a nice sense of security in their ability to move. And then the last area that we have is this early symbolic play. So that's that early imitation, the cooking, talking on the phone, feeding the baby, right? Putting the baby to bed, the good night, good morning kind of play, right? They fall asleep, they wake up, they fall asleep, they wake up. That early play, the boo-boos, like magic kisses, doctor kind of play starts to happen as well. And this is really like the integration of all of this. So to do any of that symbolic play, we need to have a really refined sense of our body awareness, a really refined sense of our spatial awareness and our touch system and how things form and fit with our body. And it gets paired with memories, with an emotional texture, right? So we're imitating things that we've done with other people. And that looks different for every child, depending on the emotional texture that goes with those activities that they did with other people, right? So we see more of an emotion regulation piece coming here as now all of these experimental things with our body and our emotions get mixed with memories and a little early, reflective capacity that's happening. So if we look at that developmental progression of play at this age and we see like, okay, it's not happening, right? We might be stuck in an area. We might be stuck in fill and empty, right? Where they're just dumping toys all the time, just going to all the bins and dumping toys all the time, or only wanting to go over to the water play and pour and fill and empty in the water play, or they only want to play peekaboo or only want to play chase. Still to this day, I will tell you the biggest way in our sensory gym that we know kids are having a tricky time in this sensory motor space is a 10-year-old will go, let's play hide and seek. And you're like, right? Like the default back to this early play where they feel successful in the play and they're getting something in the very early development of sensory motor capacities is a sign that we can't motor plan at this higher level, right? So when we look as OTs, when we look at this, we say, okay, where in this continuum, right? Is it in the amount of sensory input that they need? Is it in the quality of the sensory input? Is it in the postural, the body stability, or the motor control, and the ability to plan multiple sequences, right? What is it in this continuum that's causing these challenges? And so we might, like if you're a trained OT, you might be able to look at that sensory motor piece and go, I think it's here, right? And work there. If not, what we know and what we're hoping to sort of bring to the world with this model is you can watch their way of being in the world and you can watch their emotional experience and you can deduce what could be happening in their body, right? So if you have a child who's presenting a certain way socially and emotionally, then you will know once we get all this out into the universe, then slowly but surely, that you can consider these sensory motor capacities. And the fun part is you can use sensory motor play to enhance that emotional capacity and that kind of way of acting in the world. So I want to give a few examples. So this is a bigger picture zoom out is we have 5 what we call sensory emotional personalities. These apply in our research right now. It's starts at age 4. In our clinical practice, it absolutely is 2. And then we have a few 10, 11, 12-month olds right now in the practice who don't totally can be put into one of these personality styles. So um, ultimately, the personality style gives us a path of what to do, right? And how we're understanding their patterns. So I'm going to kind of skip ahead here because I already have those. So I'm going to share a few with you. One of them is called anxious yet deeply feeling. So what does this look like? This looks like a child who's hesitant to participate, hesitant to join, might be anxious, right? In certain situations, they might need a minute, right? Like slow to warm up is the term that we often hear for these kids, where they just kind of need to take a few minutes before they join, or they completely avoid, right, interactions and completely avoid sensory motor experiences and activities that you're trying to engage them in. And what we want them to feel is the opposite, right? So that goes back to that very first slide where I said we want to invite them to feel a certain way that then invites them to do different sensory motor things that they're currently avoiding. And that feeling we want them to have is secure, in control, protected, and powerful. So here's some games that we play for that, right? So if you've got this child who's presenting as anxious yet deeply feeling, who is avoiding certain activities, very or gets very upset and dysregulated during activities or interactions, this is the kind of play we want to try, right? We want to try the hide and seek. We want to try peekaboo. We want to do fort building for our younger kids, any sort of protection type fort-ish play, which is what that hide and seek for the early play kind of provides, and the peekaboo as well. Early caregiving themes, cooking, getting dressed, that kind of thing. And then this sort of injury and repair play with doctors and nurses and that kind of thing. For our 2s and 3s and 4s and 5s, this looks more in the symbolic space, right? Superhero play, real life hero play, police, firefighters, knights. If there's a specific fear, right, that we're going on a monster hunt, right? So if they're afraid of monsters, like we're going to go find those monsters and we're going to track them, right? We're doing that kind of play to kind of get head on, help them feel that powerful. So from a sensory motor standpoint, we're building a safe space. As we build that safe space with them, they're pushing, pulling, climbing, carrying, right? So that's proprioception, and that calms the body. So if we've got this very nervous, overwhelmed child, proprioceptive feedback is going to calm and organize. And then you built a safe space with them, which also calms and organizes, right? So now they have this nice little safe space that they're going to be in, that they helped build. So their body is brought down, and then they get to decide when they go out to explore, right? And they go out and they explore the play that and the activity and the interaction they were nervous about, and then they come back into their safe space, right? And the biggest part here for these kids who become easily overwhelmed, a lot of times this is a profile of sensory over responsivity, right? Where they're responding too much to sensory input. Active participation is key, right? We don't ever want to hand over hand and make them experience a sensory experience that they don't like, right? And that's where this exploration piece comes in. So you go in the safe space with them, we explore it together, we come back out all in play. As our kids get a little bit older, here's just some examples, right? So we want to have thinking about getting in that whatever experience it is that they're nervous about. So if it's movement, right? And then they're the police officer and they're running to get the bad guys. And when they get the bad guys, you're going to have them, oh, I got them, right? So then now they're rolling on the floor and they're capturing and, that kind of thing. So moving that vestibular system, right? Running and providing it that way, maybe climbing and jumping to provide that movement experience, rolling and tumbling, those sorts of things. When we think about costumes, right, that there are different textures. So we bring in that touch experience. We might be a firefighter and we might be in a costume and we're reaching to get the fire. So we're climbing, and then we might have different textured things that represent the fire. So it really is like, how do I get that experience that they're avoiding into the play with them in this caregiver, protector, powerful, brave space so that they're not nervous about doing it. And then we have our other kids who present as very unaware, right? So you're trying to engage them, you're trying to engage them, you're trying to engage them, and they're like, like often families will describe these kids as like in their own world, right? Or daydreamers, difficult to engage, difficult to get into a back and forth with, right? That's our unaware yet deep thinkers. And so we want to bring about interest, engagement, connection, and exploration. And the way that we do that is through the kind of play that invites that with a whole body component to it. Chase, hide and seek, the anticipation games we were just talking about, building and knocking down, right? All of that builds that interest and engagement. From a connection standpoint, literally connecting, right? Swinging towards each other, catching, crawling through tunnels to each other, building roads to each other, right? Our older kids, we do like missions, right? We have walkie-talkies or telephone calls to each other to invite that connection and play and that interest and engagement. And then we get to our 2s and 3s and 4s, we can do exploration. So whatever they love, right? If they have a favorite thing, if it's animals, and we've got animals all over our play space, and they're going to go on a safari and see all the animals, and it's a whole body experience. If they love dinosaurs, then we're going on a dinosaur excursion. And the idea is that the motivating object or item gets their body activated, right? So we activate them and they become more interested and aware of their environment. And then we add that multisensory component to it. So as they're doing the exploring, whether it's tunnel kind of play or road building play or chase, we're chasing and we're moving in different ways. So we're climbing around furniture, we're rolling on the floor, right? We're doing all of these different big body, whole body activities that are building up that interest and engagement through that activation of the movement system, the muscle system, the touch system, right? Upregulating all of those systems. So a lot of times these kids fall into the category of what's called sensory under responsive, right? Not having enough feedback from the muscles and from the systems of their body. So just here's some other examples. You can just use pictures, right? You can use the toys that they have to create these adventures. And then you can do all the actions, right? So you're flying them around. You might pick them up and fly them around. You're stomping, you're jumping, you're rolling, right? So you might fly, lifting them up and running to the different planets. Your helicopter spinning to the dinosaurs, right? In each dinosaur land. You're jumping to each of the islands, which could be pillows, right? Throw pillows, or you're rolling and swimming through the ocean, right? To spot the sea life. So the idea is that you're getting the whole body involved to build that interest and engagement, and to activate all of those sensory systems. And then the last one I'll share, I figured I'd only have time for three, and these are the ones that are more like sensory based and less motor based. So the last one is our confused yet full of wonder. A lot of times these are our kids who have difficulty in that fine tuning of sensory information, what's called sensory discrimination. Um, and what this looks like is either totally confused about how to do any, like what they're being offered to do or what just happened, or full of wonder, moving everywhere, right? So they're all over the place. They never stop moving. They never stop touching. They never stop, right? So in some ways, this traditionally is known as a sensory seeker, but it doesn't work, right? So they seek the sensation, but it doesn't calm them down, right? And it's because they don't need a certain amount of sensation. They actually need to better understand the current sensory experience that they're having. So because we need them to better understand, the play is about wondering and experimenting. So if I have time, I'll give an example of a 10-month-old that I had an evaluation with last week that is like exactly this, and the presenting concerns was exactly that he never stops moving, right? He's always on the go. It's difficult to calm him down to go to sleep. It's difficult for him to settle, right? But there's just constant like this upregulation and this moving. So when we engaged in more trial and error, and I wonder what happens if I do this kind of play, then we saw the movement slow down. So we did like we put a ball through the tunnel, and then do we put the ball, does it fit through the other side of the tunnel? Can we put it inside the swing, right? Where else does this ball fit? So as this little guy crawled and moved and put this ball in all these different places, it was much more organized. So as it was like, how does this fit? How does this work? What happens if I do this, right? Is sort of the kind of play. So fill and empty, trial and error, pulling, twisting, turning, putting inside of. And as our kids get a little bit older, things like, being a ninja warrior, doing experiments, being an architect, being a builder, right? That kind of thing. The idea here is the variety. So you're doing lots of different ways to balance, lots of different ways to move the body, lots of different amounts of force needed, right? Weights and sizes of objects, different textures. So it's more about variety and less about amount of input. So how can we build this? What fits into this, right? How do I, build up something super tall? How do I make something really small? And it could literally be anything: pillows, cushions, blankets, cups, anything that's around will be fine for this. Lifting, throwing, pushing, pulling, climbing, right? All of those things at different paces and different rates. And then we're using language with this. What's too big? What's too small? What's too heavy? What's too light, right? To layer on that discrimination of the experience. And then as our kids get a little bit older, things like I was like, I'm wooing on summer here with the carnival game. So basically summarizing a bit here that the when we're thinking about play, right, a good acronym to keep in mind is what are the playful interactions that I am setting up? What sensory experiences am I including? How am I using myself? I know we didn't get to this part, like the affect piece, and then how am I building that relationship with the caregiver? So I did want to share a few resources and then I'll happy to hang out and take some questions, but I do have a podcast called A Sensory Emotional Lens. It's a most of the time weekly, bi-weekly podcast, and we talk all about the connection between sensory motor and social emotional, different scenarios that come up. The series, if you look back through old ones, we've done the sensory overlay of different diagnoses of different situations like the new school year, the holidays, the change in transitions, being mean, right? Whatever topic feels like a hot topic in the practice, we generally use that as a space to talk about it there. Um, so there's that. And then we do offer also courses on the model. So sensoryemotional.org is the place to go for sort of all these resources. There's a link to the podcast. There's a link about the courses. We also have a online training module that we use for caregivers. That's also linked in that website. I realized I don't have like a separate slide for it, but um, it's we use it in our practice as like a partnering activity with our work. So families will go on and learn how to carry over what we're doing in the gym. But also there are families that come to our practice for evaluations that live very far away and can't come for sessions. So they'll use it, you know, as the actual work once they have the information about the sensory emotional personality. So that's on there as well. So I'm happy to take any questions or wonders. Yes, and my program manager would be mad that I blew past the social media page, but we do have that. I can share that again really quick. It's pretty active and we try to make it very functional with different strategies and ideas for home. So one for the practice, um, and then this one's more like general sensory emotional strategies and resources. In the process, we have a children's book series that I'm working on, as well as a parenting book that I'm working on. So those will be updated on social when those are available, as well as on those websites. So the goal being to kind of keep talking more about this connection between the social emotional sensory motor and how we can sort of work through the body to support emotion development and regulation. Okay. Any wonders, questions, anything? We lost the chat, I think. So if anybody put any questions in the chat, I didn't see them. Sorry.
And then I can also send the resources that you just shared to everybody.
Okay, perfect.
The link for the recording. Now go ahead and stop the recording. So if anybody wants to ask any questions, feel more comfortable.